Namaskar and thank you for joining us on our weekly program on geoeconomics. A columnist writing on Pakistan recently lamented that the country is perennially borrowing from the IMF. Now, since joining the IMF, in fact, in 1950, Pakistan has sought IMF bailouts 24 times. The country ranks fifth in outstanding debt with the IMF, which is around $7.5 billion. And from April 2023 to June of 2026, Pakistan needs to repay $77.5 billion in external debt. That is substantially high for an economy that is struggling to come back on track, battered by political and economic instability and also policy decisions that have not helped the economy but have rather helped the military to prosper. So to discuss this, we have with us two important guests. We'll be joined by Ambassador Sheelkant Sharma, former senior diplomat, who will be joining us on Zoom. But for the moment, we have with us Dr. Nilanjan Banik, senior economist. Dr. Banik, Pakistan has a huge external debt. Between April 2023 and June of 2026, it needs to repay $77.5 billion. The economy is only about $350 billion. So does that really set the economy's recovery back quite a bit?
I don't think so, Mark. Let me explain the Pakistani economy and try to compare that with what is happening in India. Now, you have rightly mentioned that the debt is a big problem for Pakistan. Now, how you can actually repay the debt? If your economy is doing well, or for that matter, if your external sector, in terms of your exports, you are doing well. Now, if I'm looking into the Pakistan economy, it is right now growing at a rate of 3.8%. The growth rate of GDP is around 3.8%. Compare that with India, it is, in case of India, we are growing in excess of 7.5%. If you are talking about the inflation rate in Pakistan is almost touching 30%, whereas the inflation rate for India is around 5%. If you are talking about the current account deficit, for India, it is only 1.2% of our GDP, but for Pakistan, it's almost touching 4% of their GDP. Now, you might wonder that why is it that in case of Pakistan, they are not able to export so much so? Because if you look into the major exportable items of Pakistan, this include items such as cotton, textile, this include items like low technology, items like leather footwear. These also include items like metals. Now, because of recession in Europe as well as in China, what we see is the demand for metal, the demand for all these items such as cotton textile, leather footwears, those have fallen. On the other hand, if you look into what Pakistan import, most part of its import goes in importing crude oil, like what we do in India. They also import heavily electronic items. And most of this crude oil and electronic items, we say these are price inelastic, meaning that as the economy continue to grow, no matter what is the price, you will have to import this item. Now, Pakistan is faced with a scenario where its exports are not so much in demand in rest of the world, but it has to continue importing all these items which are price sensitive, and because of the war, the price of crude has gone up. And because of that, you see that Pakistan has to spend so much more in terms of importable. In addition to that, if I look into the economy, the domestic economy, yes, and the policymaker who are actually running the Pakistani economy, there is no coherent policy structure which is in place. Okay. Now, if I'm a foreign investor, I would rather try to invest in an economy where there is no policy paralysis. But if you see what is happening or what was happening in Pakistan over the last 5 years, you will see that because of the political unrest, there is also no clear-cut signal about what would be an ideal economic policy. Okay. So as a foreign investor, I also don't like to invest in an economy where I don't have any clear-cut policy message. And yes, in top of that, in terms of the domestic economy, if I want to do business, there are 30 different type of taxes that I need to pay. Now, when the cost of doing business is so high, of course, the domestic economy is also not going to flourish, you know.
Sure.
So all these factors taken together, we have ended up in a scenario where the domestic economy is not growing, where the foreign institutional investors, they are also not willing to invest. The foreign direct investment is falling. And in terms of the foreign exchange reserve, right now, Pakistan has only...
We'll expand on some of these points, Dr. Banik, but let me bring in Ambassador Sheelkant Sharma. Ambassador Sheelkant Sharma had served as the Secretary General of the SAARC as well and knows Pakistan very well. Ambassador Sharma, you know, many of the major repayments that Pakistan has over the next 3 years are to Chinese financial institutions, also to private creditors and Saudi Arabia. So it's more than just the IMF bailouts that Pakistan is seeking. How dependent is Pakistan on outside support?
I would say fully, in the sense that the IMF bailout is only for their debt servicing of this $77 billion, requirement. The external agencies which have been helping Pakistan, like China, Saudi Arabia, UAE, all their help is also connected with the IMF, in the sense that if the IMF conditions are such that they want to make sure that these creditors of Pakistan will also be advance credit to Pakistan. So they have. It's a very delicate balancing that they have to do about external financial support. And so far, I think the caretaker government had managed to at least give us a semblance that they are working towards being, worthy of some support. But I would like to say the economy is in a deep sink, a deep problem. But Pakistan, has been through this several times in the past 77 years or so. Right. And it's the political game that its backers play, for whom Pakistan remains important, even for the US, despite its horrendous experience in Afghanistan and despite Osama bin Laden being found in Pakistan. The US still is somehow the other beholden to Pakistan, and the IMF bailouts are actually with the US consent.
All right.
So, and Chinese, of course, for them it is the iron brother.
Okay.
Recently, even Saudi Arabia, there was the Saudi, I think, foreign minister who visited Pakistan and then gave them all out support.
These are as a result of geopolitical compulsions, you're saying. Dr. Banik, has constant military intervention in the political landscape had an impact on the economic potential of Pakistan? I mean, adversely impacted it?
Absolutely, because if you see what has happened over the last 5 years, military has been constantly intervening in the way the economy should run. Even when Imran Khan used to be the prime minister, we have seen, because in some cases, the then Prime Minister Imran Khan did not pay heed to what the Pakistani army head was suggesting, we see that the support was taken from the Pakistani government. Now, because of this, we are entering into what we call a policy paralysis. Now, when you have a policy paralysis like scenario, no foreign countries would like to invest in your country. In addition to that, what we are seeing in case of Pakistan, in terms of capital control, they don't have strict capital control like what we have in case of India or for that matter, China. So Pakistan still continued to be a feudalistic type of economy. So most of the corrupt politicians, because governance is a big issue, and most of the corrupt politicians, they're somehow able to take out the money from the country and investing in either United Arab Emirates or for that matter, London. So there is a big issue related to governance. There is a big issue related to the military intervening in the way the policy making is done, in particular the economic policy making. And because of that, we see that foreign direct investment in the green area, it has continued to fall in case of Pakistan. In addition to that, as I was trying to explain earlier, that in terms of your export also, they are not exporting highly technology intensive services sector like what India is doing, which in a way have saved the Indian economy. Because if you look into the whole of South Asia, it is the only Indian economy which is growing fast and resilient to what is happening elsewhere. That has to do with our booming IT sector, which is not there in any case of any one of the South Asian economies.
Indeed. So Pakistan is struggling to get its act together and in terms of services as well. But, Ambassador Sharma, 24 IMF bailouts since 1950. This seems to suggest that the country has not had a reasonable period of economic stability at all. They constantly keep going back to the IMF. Do you see economic instability being used, in fact, by the forces that are in control in Pakistan as a method to hire disgruntled youth into that terror factory that has been used as an instrument of state policy?
Yes, that has been so. There is no doubt about it. Actually, they cannot provide the teeming millions who are who are at the workable age, like from 20 onwards, and they just enlist them for terrorist activities and entice them and preach all this jihad. So all this jihad factory and all this talk, no matter who comes to power, somehow or the other this never recedes. This continues. And Imran Khan was sacked because he was put into all kinds of cases because he tried to challenge this deep states, this whole policies, and wanted to bring in something which is his populism probably would have helped him. But now that they have a new government and it is supported by the Islamabad by the military, they would ensure that Pakistan's forte, Pakistan's strength is its nuclear weapons. Its strength is its ability to mobilize terrorism for whatever they can do, and also its ability to serve its masters. For instance, last year there were stories that Pakistan was selling, was arranging supplies to Ukraine of military wares, military hardware.
Okay.
And that was a time when Russia had completely created a situation where NATO was reluctant and other countries were reluctant. So Pakistani supplies were, sent through London and to UK. Now, this is the kind of stuff they are capable of doing time and time again to suddenly come up and be of help to the countries who need it.
All right.
And their big population. I'll give you one just example.
Yes.
Look at Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is a much smaller economy, and it was in deep trouble 2 years back. But they have managed to come out to support Sri Lanka. And still Sri Lanka's policies have not changed. They are completely dependent on China, which was of not much use for Sri Lanka when it was in deep crisis.
Okay.
So these political factors, somehow or the other, they weigh over the economic requirements. In the case of Pakistan also, they have been playing more politics, and the army gives the impression that it is, it is the guarantor of stability. So nobody questions the army. And the recent elections have shown that even though Imran Khan's people have, his party has won, those who dependent who vote for, they won, but the courts and the parliament and everything, they're so organized that those chaps were, kept at bay.
Indeed.
And so that even the nominated seats were not, they were not allowed to
They
get.
were not allowed to by the rules of the election
So the
in Pakistan.
domestic economy or domestic political economy is in deep shambles.
Indeed.
Because of constant interference from the army.
From the deep state, also, let me bring in Dr. Banik here for a reaction. There is not much real power in the civil institutions, Dr. Banik. Though people don't see the army as the enemy, they are forced to not see it as the enemy. But we have seen in the recent elections that they want change. Now, can the army actually contribute to the economy's growth? After all, they are in positions of importance. They hold, financial positions of importance, and they are supposed to be nationalistic. So, in that context, they should be hoping to see the country revive.
That's a very important question you have raised, Mark, because if you see, army is actually not in the business of running the economy. And if you see historically, army was actually trying to take power of all the institutions which are needed to run the economy in a more sustainable and stable way. Now, you were just to touch upon, even if you look into Imran Khan's government, none of the government in Pakistan actually have the courage to go for bold structural reform. Now, what I mean to say by bold structural reform, I'll give you a simple example. In terms of subsidy that the government, all the governments over the last 5 years, they were paying per month on account of lower fuel price, it amounted to 250 billion Pakistani rupiah per month, because they did not want to increase the price of fuel, because the impression was that would some way go against them if they were to fight the election one more time, right? So even if I look into the other reforms, for instance, I was mentioning that if I were to do a business, I have to pay 30 different type of taxes, Now, if you compare that with India, the Indian GST system, we are so much more efficient. Again, if you see what is happening in terms of the court system, the court system is also in a way dependent upon the army. So in terms of the institution, we don't see a proper independent institution which are so very much necessary to run the country in a proper way. In addition to this endogenous factor, which is basically under the control of the policymaker, Pakistan was also unfortunate to have two other exogenous events. One is in the form of COVID, and the second was in the form of the flood, which happened sometime during October of 2020.
Yes.
And because of that, there was a big hit in terms of the how much the government has to pay in terms of building the infrastructure. The flood almost cost the economy in the tune of 15 billion US dollar. Now, we have had election in recent times. So most of the money are being spent for unproductive purpose. It has nothing to do with how to build your economy, how to build the institution, how to ensure that you are creating a market so that the foreigners come and invest. So those kind of things are totally absent in Pakistan. The only metrics where Pakistan is ahead of India is in terms of defense spending. In spite of their economy is is struggling, you will find that Pakistan's defense spending is almost 2.3% of their GDP, whereas for India it's actually less than 2% of GDP. So basically suggesting that the army doesn't care about people, the question that you raised, because otherwise they won't be spending that much money on the defense expenditure at a time when the economy is static.
You can't change the way the army thinks. Ambassador Sharma, corruption is another big problem. I mean, it's a huge concern because the parties that have come to power seem to have been looting the country. Much of the money that they stole perhaps, finds its way abroad, tax havens and things like that. So do you see this stopping now that to a large extent the world community has come round to this problem and it's become more digitalized and there is a lot more reporting that takes place?
It's difficult to say how they will cope with corruption because it's deeply embedded in their system, and the army itself has its hands very deep into this whole thing. This budget, for instance, our eminent colleague on this panel has made a very important point. But I wanted to add to that Pakistan's defense budget as part of the total governmental spending is very high. It runs into double digit and higher, close to 16% or even higher. Now that kind of an expenditure, if you continue to sustain, you can imagine how burdensome that could be for economy. We know in India how difficult it is for us to increase defense spending because multiple priorities contest among themselves, and we have to really squeeze hard to do that. So any conscientious economist would put Pakistan on a course where the army is told to shut up and their demands are less. They cannot be of any use. But on the other hand, they continue this whole process. And there is corruption. There is this lady, Aisha Siddiqui, who's gone who's done a lot of work on this about how the army controls the economy in terms of, occupying main sectors, and how the armed forces run these
the major institutions.
So, but she cannot enter Pakistan. She lives abroad. So anyone who talks about Pakistan in that vein, be that Hussain Haqqani, be that Imtiaz, or be that Aisha Siddiqui, they all have to be abroad. And those who come back in the political field, like now Nawaz Sharif has come back, they have to work in sync with what the deep state demands from Pindi. So corruption and, it's embedded in the whole system. They allow them to continue with this. And Imran Khan went on a tangent talking against corruption. But look what they have done to him. He became popular because people don't like corruption. That's
surprising that the multilateral institutions continue to still to work with Pakistan despite this. But Dr. Banik, the terror factory has resulted in FATF grey listing Pakistan, and some estimates say that as a result of the Financial Action Task Force's measures, the GDP has suffered a huge losses since 2008. They've estimated about $38 billion of losses. So how does this, be a wake-up call, a sort of a reality check for the deep state and the others in Pakistan?
I think yes, because Pakistan was under FATF list until 2022. Now, what does FATF basically suggesting? That if a country is using its financial system for money laundering, or for that matter, terrorism activity, then other private player in the finance domain better be careful investing in that particular economy. Now, I've already mentioned that in terms of FDI inflow into Pakistan, nothing is happening, And in addition to that, when you have a Pulwama kind of attack, or for that matter, some of the terrorist organizations like LET, which are operating inside Pakistan, and the US is also putting them under the blacklist, of course, what is going to happen is the flow of FDI into Pakistan economy, or for that matter, any multinational who are thinking about investing in Pakistan, they will be very much cautious. And therefore, the number that you are quoting in terms of the potential loss that Pakistani economy faced in terms of this, of the economy being in the FATF grey list is not surprising. I will just give you one simple example.
Quickly, sir, we are running short of time. Yes.
Yeah. In case of Pakistan, they are finding it very difficult to collect taxes. One of the reasons is all the economy is cash-based economy. Their IT system is so in tether that they are not able to go for digital transaction like the way we are doing, and formalize the economy so as to get more taxes. This is happening because they are not getting access to foreign technology, and one important reason for that has to do with Pakistan being put in that FATF grey list.
Indeed. Ambassador Sharma, coming back to the military, they have strengthened themselves. You were talking about that, reading about how they are in financially important positions. They have strengthened their own institutions. But I also asked, why are the multilateral institutions working with this kind of a setup, and the deep state? Do they have you did mention in your first answer about geopolitical compulsions. Are all of them, bound by these geopolitical compulsions?
They are, in the sense that, there is a certain global political economy in which economic factors work, but they are overridden by political considerations and geostrategic considerations. So nobody would like to let nuclear powers sink. And Pakistan's nuclear weapons accumulation has also gone apace. A country which is in deep, economic crisis has still found, money and energy and resources to build up its nuclear forces to a level which is not required. So how do you explain that?
Right.
But for support from political countries, like their country like China, for instance, they have their whole attitude, their whole approach to non-proliferation is very different from what the US professes to be. So today the whole international situation is beset with this these forces, and they ride over other factors.
Indeed. Ambassador Sharma, let me ask you this next question as well. You know, recent terror attack on Chinese workers at a dam site in Pakistan. Do you see this as a reaction to the excessive Chinese presence there? You know, a feeling amongst the common people that the country has sold out to China?
You should remember that in 2007, when Musharraf, the strongman, was in power, there was this Lal Masjid incident which happened.
Yes.
It was also coaxed by, by Musharraf's tough action against the people in the Lal Masjid in Islamabad because of Chinese behest. There were some Chinese people who were attacked by the jihadis. And the Chinese then took it up with Musharraf. I mean, he was livid, so he took action. But then look what happened to him afterwards. So in Pakistani society, this is another point which is troublesome for us also, because it's a 200 million population. And there are a lot of people who have a self-image of themselves.
Sure. So we run short of time. I'll get the last word in from Dr. Banik. There's a new government there. The caretaker government's efforts were sort of commended by the IMF. That's why they moved on with the next tranche of the loan. So do you see, the regular government making a change, working towards creating a stable environment?
If history is something that we can look upon, I don't think nothing is going to change, because as you mentioned, 24 times they have been to the IMF. And this bailout, 3 billion, is actually a drop in the ocean in terms of the total money that Pakistan owe to rest of the world. Structural reform is needed. I don't think the present government has the courage to undertake all the structural reform, like the way I mentioned, in terms of deregulating the price of fuel, or for that matter, bringing structural reform in the public sector.
We leave it there. Thank you very much, Dr. Nilanjan Banik, senior economist, and Ambassador Sheelkant Sharma, former senior diplomat. Thank you for enlightening us on the situation in Pakistan, the economy there, the IMF bailouts, and how the economy is moving forward. Well, or even backwards, or staying stagnant. Well, on the 20th of March 2024, IMF reached a staff-level agreement on the second and final review of the 9-month standby arrangement with Pakistan. Once approved, Pakistan will have access to SDR 828 million, which is around 1.1 billion US dollars. And this is the result of the good program implementation by the State Bank of Pakistan and the caretaker government in the recent months. So Pakistan hopes to move from stabilization to a sustained recovery with this money. Thanks very much for watching. Namaskar.